Tales of the Legion Project podcast, Legion of Superheroes Annual number 2. Hello and welcome everyone to the Tales of the Legion Project podcast. I am your host, Eric.
And I'm your host, Peter.
Welcome to episode 6 of the Tales of the Legion Project podcast, where Peter and I are going to talk about annual number 2. And just to remind folks, this is, the Tales is the side podcast that we do, where we talk about Legion of Superheroes adjacent material, comic books and other things that are not part of the numbered issues of the Baxter run.
This is our little pit stop along the way.
Pit stop. Little catch-all. I love this concept, actually, Peter. I'm so glad that you had thought of doing the Tales part of our Legion Project podcast, because we get to delve into other things that are not part of, like I said, not part of the numbered issues and that narrative, and so we get to break from that every once in a while. So it's refreshing to touch on some of these other things.
And we will just to tease the listeners a little bit. Don't go listen to the ending of this episode, but we will really test that theory or swim in that concept in our next episode, but we'll talk about that at the end of this episode. Because this one, even having said that, this Tales does kind of play into the larger chronology that we're dealing with, because it's an annual, but it's still a little bit of a breakaway. But what we have in store for next time is going to be like the truest form of the Tales concept, so that'll be fun. So there's a nice little tease.
And Peter and I have been talking about this since our last recording over a month ago for issue 27, Peter. Yeah. And I have been chomping at the bit to get to this point, so I'm very excited to talk about this, but you'll have to wait.
So, right, as you mentioned, annual number 2 of the Baxter run, taking place between the issues 27 and 28, in story and in shipping publication too. This is what the Tales was created for. We were able to talk about annuals, and what's odd is that this is the Baxter annual number 2. And yet it connects to Legion of Superheroes Annual 3, which we did talk about way back in episode 3 before we ever really came up with the Tales concept. So, but it was an issue that it was like we covered 3 issues in there, I think 2 or 3 issues. So we didn't have to give it its own episode. But yeah, Baxter Annual 2 connecting from 1986, connecting to regular title Annual 3 from back in, I don't know when it was, 83 or 84.
84, so, yeah.
84, okay, yeah. Interesting.
What? And then, of course, Legion Annual 2 that we're talking about, reprinted later in Tales of the Legion Annual number 5. So, I have to admit, Peter, when I was getting into taking notes on this issue, I got a little confused as to which annual we were talking about. I think I actually messaged you and said, which annual is this?
Oh, funny. There's only 2 more Tales reprint issues after that Annual 5.
I was wondering, because this is actually, I believe, in my collection, this is the last issue that I physically have.
You have this issue?
Cool. This Tales annual, yeah. So yeah, I don't have any more. So any reference to our Tales issues going forward, the final 2, I guess, I'll have to look at the covers online to see what they look like. So
Yeah, I don't have this issue. The Tales Annual 5. I have my last Tales issue was the Tales reprint from our last regular episode for issue 27. So I'm done as well. Yeah, so that's kind of sad. Even though I'm still looking for them, though, in the back issue bins every now and then. Well, not now because I'm not going out, but I will pick up and fill the gaps because I just want to see them. I want to compare and I want to see them and, see the ads.
Hey, and Peter, since we are talking about these Tales reprint issues, and like I just said, this annual number, Tales Annual number 5, is my last physical copy of the Tales issues in my collection. I wanted to do a giveaway for our listeners. Now we've done one of these before. Peter had acquired a trade of the Eye for an Eye storyline, and we gave that away to one of our lucky listeners. And so I wanted to do something now for this our in this Tales episode. So I have. I will be right up front about a couple of things for our listeners. So I have a run of the Tales issues, but not a complete run. Unfortunately, I do have 25 issues though of the Tales. So from 326, which is the start of the reprint of the Baxter run, through 342, and then I have a gap here of a few issues, and then I have 347 through 352, and then 2 annuals, number 4 and this one that we're going to talk about, number 5. So that's 25 issues of the Tales of the Legion of Superheroes volume, and I would love to give those away to a lucky listener. Like I said, again, caveat: these are reader copies. They are not in the greatest of condition, but they are not covers falling off and all that stuff. So they are. So in other words, they're not 9.4s or anything like that. Probably more like 5s. Of course, I don't really understand that whole grading system, but they are not near mint. I know that for sure. So anyway, so I like to give these away to some listener. So all you have to do is email me at longboxreview@gmail.com, or you can also email Peter
at peter@thedailyrrios.com.
Yep, and then we will take all those entries and throw them in a hat, and I'll have just like we did last time. If you don't mind, Peter, I'll just have one of my granddaughters pick a winner out of the hat, literally out of a hat.
I love it.
Do we want to have a deadline on this? No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think the last time we did 3 weeks, but I guess we'll just okay. Maybe we'll do like whenever our next recording is, which is usually about 2-3 weeks or something like that. But we also don't know when this episode is going to come out, So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
we'll keep you apprised on Twitter.
There we go. Okay, very good. Sounds good. All right, so
now are some of those issues? Did you pick some of those issues you picked up at the time of release, right?
Yes. Yeah. The initial ones, like the first issues, the first reprint, the 326 and on, I got those as they were coming out, as they were being released back in the day, because why I can't remember exactly why I was waiting to read the Tales issues as opposed to getting the Baxter issues.
I think you said before cost, probably.
Oh yeah, you're right. I'm sure that was it. Stupidly so, because then years later I go back and buy all of the Baxter issues. Anyway, so yeah, and there was a point also later where I realized, I have this gap in my Baxter run issues, and I was having a hard time finding those, and so I was trying to fill those issues or those gaps with the more easily available Tales issues. And then at one point I'm like, I don't like that. I need a complete run of the actual volume. And so anyway, that's why I ended up with so many, but obviously there was 4 or 5 issues there where I just simply couldn't find them, at least in the area in which I was looking at the comic shops that I have here.
So these are pedigree. These are from your collection, not just like, secondhand owned or anything, but that's a pedigree.
Yeah, lovingly bagged and boarded, or at least bagged. I didn't always board my comics until more recent years, but yeah, I kept them in as good a condition as I received them.
These comics have 1986 Eric DNA on them. 1987.
Ew.
Or air molecules. How about that? Trapped in the pages. I always think about that, actually. I think about, like, when my great selling off of comics that began in the early, like in 1999, 2000 on eBay. And, I was selling off these huge chunks of X-Men and other stuff. And it's like, where are they now? Where are those comics that I touched? Where have they gone?
Where are these pieces of you?
Yeah. Some of them are in like Germany and South America, and just
wow,
it's crazy.
You're traveling the world, Peter.
I guess.
Forget Elf on a Shelf. It's Peter in a box, maybe.
All right.
Enough of that.
We should do that. Great contest, though. I love that. So, people, if you're still collecting paper, here's a way to get these issues. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, let's jump in then. Legion of Superheroes, Annual 2, and then I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about the Tales reprint in Annual 5 when we talk about the cover. But first off, hit us with our synopsis and our credit box.
All right. So, Annual number 2, Child of Darkness, Child of Light. This is by Paul Levitz with Kurt Swan and Keith Giffen as pencilers, Larry Malstead and Ernie Colon as inkers, Carl Gafford, colorist, John Costanza, letterer, Karen Berger, editor, with a lovely cover by Steve Lytle. So, Annual number 2, Darkseid's spirit lingers and laughs. He then conjures a darkness into which he reaches in and pulls out a, quote, living treasure. Talking to the child, Darkseid explains that neither its parents nor its twin will know that Darkseid took, transformed, and transferred it to another time. Darkseid also names it Validus. Darkseid declares his curse fulfilled. Later on Rimbor, Validus is rampaging in the streets before Ulvir, acolyte of Darkseid, takes Validus to the Dark Lord's shrine. The Legion searches for Validus and eventually finds the shrine. There is a brief altercation before Ulvir and Validus escape in a boom tube. The pair arrive in Metropolis and Validus rips into an apartment, and the Legionnaires surmise that it was Saturn Girl and Lightning Lads. Validus then turns his sight towards Legion HQ. Despite Timberwolf's best efforts, Validus tears into the HQ and removes Lightning Lads and Saturn Girl's monitor board tiles. On Wynath, the Rance family relaxes at a park when a boom tube appears. Saturn Girl compels the nearby Wynathians to flee, and Lightning Lad finds a safe place for son Graham. Lightning Lad attempts to subdue Ulvir, and Saturn Girl tries to communicate with Validus, both with little success. Validus picks up Graham, prompting Lightning Lad to threaten to kill the monster. Just before Lightning Lad blasts Validus, Saturn Girl stops him, telling him, "They're both our sons!" Validus then puts Graham down. Darkseid's shadow appears, and Saturn Girl hears him laughing. She pleads with the Dark Lord to give her back her son. Amazingly, Darkseid relents. Validus transforms into Graham's twin. Ulvir does not take this change of events well, demanding Darkseid explain himself. Darkseid says that mortals should not question the games of the gods and turns Ulvir to dust. Later, Darkseid ponders how children of light have plagued his advancing darkness when he receives a visitor. Saturn Girl leaves a flower as a token of her gratitude. She tells him, "You have my thanks for your mercy," and then adds, "But I'm not afraid of you, not afraid of the darkness, and I never will be." And Darkseid laughs. I want to do something like that too. It's like, how do you emulate Darkseid laughing? It's just such a weird concept.
No, I think he'd have a much different laugh. It wouldn't be so, Sylvester Snively or whatever that character is.
I just, I don't know. I'm sure Darkseid has laughed many times in various appearances, but he doesn't strike me as a character who just laughs.
I think those older Darkseid those older Kirby appearances, he's way more aloof than most people think.
Well, and I also think he's a lot more movie serial villainy in those earlier appearances. He's he very much props himself up as this grand villainous character, and of course his plans constantly get foiled.
Oh yeah. And I think there's an element of that here too. But I also feel like he's so funny when he just kind of shows up randomly and he's sitting on a couch, He's always just like kind of popping up. And they make fun of that in the Ambush Bug miniseries and even in Tom King's Mr. Miracle. I mean, he's just showing up and eating out of a vegetable.
Yes, I thought that's what you were referring to at first.
Yeah.
Well, and he does a lot of sitting in this too.
So, what did you think of? Do you want me to start? You want to go first?
Why don't you go first?
Okay. So somewhere along my research of this issue, someone made the comment of it's the story they wanted, but not the execution of it.
Interesting.
Not in this particular execution, And I got to agree with that. It's the story I've wanted. It's not like it's been a major subplot throughout the stories that we've been reading, but it connects back to, obviously the Great Darkness saga. Obviously it connects back to the Legion annual that we talked about, annual number 3 from 1984. It connects to the story of Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad because of the pregnancy. You could even say it harkens all the way back to, the Fatal Five's first appearance way back in Adventure Comics 352, almost 20 years prior to when this issue came out, right? Because of first appearance of Validus. So I wanted the next chapter in whatever this Darkseid curse is, right? And I almost thought I was going to get Validus's origin beyond just Darkseid's transformation of the character. Like, when he first appeared. I thought those first few pages on Rimbor, I thought that was like when Darkseid sent him back in time. Like, I thought that was the first rampage of Validus, right? And then you factor in the Kurt Swan art and the Paul Levitz writing in this one, which I think takes a little bit of a turn. It's a change. There's a difference to it. You put all that together, and by the end of it, after the first read, I sort of felt a little empty and a little not disappointed, but just like, all right, let me sit on that. And then I read it again, and some things started to become clear. But all to say, the story of all of this played out differently and in a more interesting way in my head than it did on the page.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not fair. And when we play that game in other issues, it's not because I feel the execution of the story. I don't mean the choices made. I just mean like the flat out, just the draftsmanship, the writing, the turn the page, all that kind of stuff. In those other issues, they kind of, it's still an interesting book, right? Like maybe the choices were just different. Whereas I felt like in this one, there's such a major gap between what we got and what I wanted that this is one of the first times that I sort of felt Um, I think they could have done better. Ouch. I don't know.
Okay. I think we are in, if not perfect alignment, very, very close because I had very similar thoughts.
Yeah.
This was, well, to touch on what you just said. Okay, so I'm going to jump around here a little bit if you don't mind. So on the cover, and we'll talk about that in particular in just a minute, but on the cover it says, Darkseid's curse fulfilled? Question mark? Right? And so that led me down this path. Okay, so what was his curse? And so I had to go back. I had to go back at the Great Darkness Saga.
Mm-hmm.
And,
so did I.
And so the central question is, like the cover says, is Darkseid's curse fulfilled? What is the curse? So this is something that was first appeared in Legion of Superheroes number 294, and that was nearly 4 years before this issue. So a nearly 4-year-old subplot, Peter, since we recently talked about subplots in the main book.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this thing going on with Darkseid, and so I pulled a different or some quotes here from that issue. And so in the issue, Saturn Girl, so the Legion's battling Darkseid and his minions, and Saturn Girl says to Darkseid, maybe even mockingly a little bit, your mileage may vary there, maybe you interpret it differently, but she says, "Can't you feel it, Darkseid? Can't you feel yourself losing all your power, and you can't even defeat us? This is no longer the universe you knew, monster, and it is beyond your power." To which Darkseid replies, "I sense a truth in your words." And then we have that big scene where he basically screams enough and he slinks away, essentially, at the end of the storyline. And so then a few pages later, he says, I leave you my curse, Legionnaires, the curse of darkness growing within you, destroying you from within, and that which is purest of you shall be the first to go. And okay, so that's the setup. And this is where I kind of dovetail into what you were saying or how you were feeling about it. This is not the story that I expected when I read those words when they were first published in whatever year that was, 4 years before 1980. So when I was reading the Great Darkness Saga as it was being published, I thought, oh boy, this is going to be something big. Who is the purest of you, of the Legion, that will have this darkness growing within them? Of course, I was thinking one of the Legionnaires. I would never have guessed who it actually turned out to be, which is kind of interesting in the way that Paul built this up through the pregnancy, through that which was it, Annual 3 in 1984 when the babies were born, and now we get this, right. So there was that setup for this, and yes, I, like you, I was like, okay, there's some interesting things in here. But more from a storytelling standpoint for me than the actual story itself. I will be quite honest, I did not care for about 30 pages of this, 44-page annual. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with those 30 pages. They're telling a story. It's advancing a plot. Not much characterization going on there, as far as I could see, but it was a bit like an old Silver Age Legion issue, but without the charm of being a Silver Age issue. And maybe unfairly, I am applying. Or I have this reaction because, that big chunk of that 30 pages or if not all the 30 pages that I'm referring to, is drawn by Kurt Swan, the venerable Legion artist of the Silver Age. So, and that's not a knock about Kurt Swan. It's not. It's just, the issue just is. And I was quite disappointed with it, Peter. I think as that's all that talk, all those words, it was okay, and I wasn't all that impressed. How about that?
No, I get it. I really do get it. And I even remember when we talked about annual number 3, which also had the same format, right? More or less. It had the Kurt Swan artwork, and then it had an epilogue by Giffen featuring Darkseid, which to connect to what you were saying about going all the way back to the Great Darkness Saga, that was like the next bump in the road, right? This epilogue that fleshed out exactly what Darkseid's curse, what the target was going to be for the curse, and it turned out to be the twin child of Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad, right? And that was the reveal. Not only was it a reveal of the curse, but it was Paul Levitz and company, or I don't know whose idea it was, but it was their way retroactively to turn this baby into Validus, because Validus was an unknown character, meaning that nobody knew his origin when he first appeared back in 1967, but he was just powerful, and they kept making references that he's not evil, he just has rage. And they even mentioned that in this issue. But he had these mental lightning bolts. So I think it was just Legion fandom. They were the ones, I think, who first hit this notion of, well, if he has mental lightning bolts, that connects to both Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad. So I don't know if they went so far as to say, could he be the baby, some future baby, but Paul Levitz and company certainly made that connection, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure somebody has the exact facts and of all of that. I'm just speaking off the cuff here, just based on my experience with the Legion. So, all right, so you have the Great Darkness Saga, which is the curse. You have the annual number 2, which is entitled The Curse, I think. And, annual number 3. And we get the revelation. Oh, my God, it's Validus. What? Not only is it Validus, he's a Legionnaire baby, which means we already know that he's killed Invisible Kid.
Right.
So then we come to this issue, and now it's time for the Legion and the parents of Validus to finally realize what is going on. And, in that same format as that first annual, where you have in this annual, you have Giffen bookending Kurt Swan. And I remember us talking about that first annual number 3, and I was saying, it feels a little bit like Levitz is keeping the story slightly vague because it's in the middle of the Eye for an Eye story. It's in the middle of the war against the Legion of Supervillains. So they're not directly relating back to that story, but they're just kind of referencing it. And I think that's what this issue suffers from too. It feels almost like an inventory story or a filler story to a degree, because they want to give Kurt Swan pages to do, but they don't want to necessarily trap him into the larger continuity. They're just like, here you go. Here's a story that that speaks to Kurt Swan's artwork, because he was the artist on the Fatal Five's first appearance, right? So there's that history. And that's why I felt like Levitz was almost writing, and you picked up on it, in a Silver Age way. The dialogue feels very Silver Agey and not as in depth or not as connected as the issues that we're reading, right? Like when we read those issues, those characters are talking to each other, not just at each other. And I got that a lot here, where it was like everybody feels like they're screaming at each other. because they're all talking with such importance of what's going on. And then you have the artwork, and it's sort of all over the place, especially, Validus looks really big in some pages, and then in other pages he's the same height as some of the characters, and it just all feels kind of wonky. So if that's what you're picking up on, that's what I'm picking up on too.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that's not a trend for these annuals, because, well, we liked annual number 1, that, the mystery of Laurel Kent, who shot Laurel Kent. But when they have these, like, let's bring in these classic artists, suddenly they want to emulate that style as well, and I'm not here for that. There's 40 years of Legion, of 30 years of Legion prior to this that I could read if I want that style. Like, I wanted more. I wanted different.
Yeah.
That's so bad of me to say, but whatever.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you on that. I think there is a definite tone to these annuals that is separate from the main run. And so now that you brought that up, I'm very curious what the next annual will be like. Annuals have this long tradition of, at least DC annuals, of being these special things, kind of an event, sort of, that was not necessarily tied to the continuity of what was going on in the main title. That changed, of course, about this time frame, as I recall. As we got into the 80s, where suddenly the annual would be like the culmination of a particular storyline, or something along those lines. Not that Paul's doing this, but he is continuing on a story point that he brought up 4 years earlier, and then touched on it again in that previous annual, and now we get this supposed resolution to this. But I also know that Darkseid shows up again in another volume of the Legion, so we get that. Well, I don't know, I can't remember if it's an actual continuation or not, or even really has anything to do with the Validus character at all, and the curse. So I guess we'll get to that some year, Peter, but some decade. But yeah, it's interesting, the tone, and the thing that I really picked up on, like I said earlier, looking at or what I glommed onto about this annual is more about the storytelling technique that Paul is employing, and so I definitely want to talk about that when we really dig into this. So I don't know. Do we want to? that was a lot of general thoughts about the issue. do we want to step back and talk about the cover and then get into more of these points, the particulars?
Yeah, let me just flesh out the credit box a little bit more before we do that, because in the book itself, it just says the artist, the pencils are Keith Giffen and Kurt Swan, the inks are Ernie Colon, Larry Malstead, but they don't really talk about who's doing what, right?
That's true.
There's a lot of confusing information online. So from the Grand Comic Book Database, for the Baxter Annual number 3, which is what we both read, or Annual 2, which we read, it says Keith Giffen did the pages 1 through 3 and 40 through 44. That makes sense, right? We can see that. And then Kurt Swan did the middle pages, 4 through 39. Now here's where it gets confusing. They say Ernie Colon inked all of the Giffen stuff, and Larry Malstead inked all of the Kurt Swan stuff. Okay? But then when you go to the Grand Comic Book Database for the Tales of the Legion of Superheroes Annual number 5 reprint, they say here that Larry Malstead inked pages 1 through 27, and Ernie Colon inked pages 28 through 44. So one did half and the other one did the other half. And that delineation, that divide is also reflected in just like a generic DC wiki on the Baxter issue. On the Tales reprint annual number 5. They have the same information. Now, I don't know if they're stealing from the Grand Comic Book Database. So it's weird that the Baxter run under the Grand Comic Book Database would have a different inking information. I don't think they would have gone back and re-inked it for the reprint unless the pages were like destroyed or something like that, or the inked pages needed to be redone or something. So, I mean, I kind of want to go with the notion that it does feel like Larry Malstead did the first half and Ernie Colon did the second half.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and we could talk about some particulars on that, but I had, because I have this Tales reprint, I went through it and compared it page by page to see what, if anything there was, because usually sometimes they'll leave out a page or two just because of the page constraints that they have on the reprint issues, which they did not do in this. But as far as I can tell, it is just a strict reproduction of the pages from the Baxter issue. I don't see any difference in the art in terms of the inking that we're talking about on those particular pages. So, and I agree. I totally see that Malstead did the first half and Colon did was it the other? No, yeah, Colon did the back half. I think it's quite obvious when you think of it that way, and full disclosure to our listeners, I had these questions that about the who did what inking wise, and I asked Peter because I figured he in his encyclopedic knowledge would perhaps know the answer to these questions, because I was confused as to who did what. I had a sense of a difference, but I wasn't quite sure because Malstead normally inks Giffen when he's working on stuff, and Colon sometimes steps in and does things. But given that it was Kurt Swan doing this, who did what? And I even briefly I thought, and perhaps stupidly I thought, well, did Giffen ink Kurt Swan at one point? I was like, no. Peter set me right on that. But yeah, I agree with the second set of credits that you said, not the first one.
And look, they may be wrong too. Maybe it is Colon just on. Maybe it's Colon like on both the Giffen bookends and half of the Kurt Swan. It's because you can see a difference in part 3.
Oh yeah,
of the story. And maybe Larry Malstead did none of the Giffen stuff. I don't know. I could make an argument for both ways, but whatever. It's not clear. I didn't look up any kind of like original art to see, if we could see if there was an inker's name on it. So somebody might know, or somebody might, feel like they have to correct us along the way or whatever. I don't know.
And please do.
Yeah. So. Okay, so let's go to the covers. As you mentioned, Steve Lytle on the Baxter annual, Kurt Swan and Alvey on the reprint annual. What thoughts do you have?
Well, I love the Baxter one over the Tales. Much like I said about the issue itself. I find the Tales cover to be just fine Legion cover. I mean, it depicts what's going on in the story in a roundabout way, given the conflict between the Legionnaires and Validus with Darkseid's ominous presence in the background. All great. But, there's, we talked about Steve Lytle's passing in our previous Legion Project episode. And boy, given that and seeing this annual cover, just makes me sad that we lost Mr. Lytle, because I love the construction of this, the colors of it. I mean, whoever did the colors on this, this is an aside, and you can strike this out of the episode, Peter, if you wish. But man, I wish we had better credits for who did the colors on these covers, because a lot of this, I think, has a lot of the success of the Baxter annual cover, I think, has to do with the shading and the colors and whatnot. But back to the Lytle's construction here with the different angle, kind of a sort of a bird's eye view angle, with Validus and his lightning, and we've got Center Girl flying up from below, and Lightning Lad's kind of hovering above everything. I don't know. I just love the way this image is constructed, and wonder, mostly because of how Lightning Lad is shown here. Was this part of a larger image that they had to crop out because of the page constraint? Because I don't know, it just seems like there's more to this. It's very very full with the characters, crowded even, and not that the Tales cover isn't crowded, because there's a lot of characters on this, but it's a different feel. So I don't know. Like I said, I like the I like the Baxter cover better for those reasons. What about you?
Yeah, it's the same thing. I had the same thought about the Tales annual number 5. It's almost claustrophobic, which is not necessarily a bad tone to a cover like that, and it has all the major players. I mean, it has characters that Validus interacts with throughout the whole thing, and just the hint of not actually Darkseid, but just a facade of Darkseid in the back, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have to get both Darkseid and the Legion and Validus. Validus feels a little low on the page for me on the Kurt Swan drawn image. But fine, totally fine. At least, it's a decent Legion cover. It speaks to what the story is. And everything you said about the Baxter issue cover, exactly my same points. Just the draftsmanship of it is really well done.
Yeah.
And I guess we should also throw out there that we don't know if Lytle also did the colors. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
Some cover artists do, some don't. So I want to make sure, maybe he did. Who knows? But usually it's been no. Like sometimes it's been like another artist, another color artist. So what did I have about the so one thing I love about the cover that factors into the story from an art standpoint is I love how big the headquarters looks.
Mm-hmm.
So this is sort of like a King Kong cover, right? It's like Validus on the top of the Empire State Building. Right?
Good point.
And I love the monstrosity, the feeling of the top of that Legion headquarters. I mean, look at Metropolis down below. This is a major futuristic city, and yet for, artist license, the headquarters looks gigantic. And in the issue, Kurt Swan is also dealing with perspective, and the perspective changes all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Where sometimes Validus is not as tall as the headquarters, yet other times he's almost taller than the headquarters. So I went back to the Tales issue where this first headquarters first appeared, which is like, I forget the number now, like 310, 311, 312, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
After the Omen story. And one of the dialogue in that story is, they're looking at the newly reformed metallic headquarters, and someone says, it's gigantic. And all of these word balloons are pointing to the promenade, like the famous Legion Plaza, right? And it's just pointing to nothing, because you get the feeling that these characters are just so tiny in the shadow of these headquarters. And that's one thing I always liked about the headquarters is this new headquarters, is that it's like, it's big, it's gigantic. In some of the schematics for it, they always talk about like the way it was constructed is odd, and like it even goes against physics and there's just an unnatural quality to it because it is so big. And speaking to that list of subplots, that's one of the things that I've been sort of touching on is like, the mystery of this headquarters. So I love that Steve Lido is reflecting on that here, and because inside the book it does not do that.
No.
Yeah, great. Kurt Swan drawing Validus. He was the artist that first drew Validus. It makes sense. Love it. But there's a clear winner in this.
Yeah.
Let me piggyback on what I love that you went back to the Great Darkness Saga, because I did the same thing with no prompting between either of us. We both did the same thing, and we both grabbed the same quotes, which is awesome. But I wanted to go back. I even went back to Validus's first appearance. We seem to always tend to go back to Adventure Comics 352, the first Fatal 5 appearance, and then it's a two-parter from back in '67. Because there's just, I don't know, a lot of stories just seem to go back to that. So I mentioned that there was Validus's origin was very mysterious from the beginning, not quite evil, mental lightning. They also even had him trapped in Intertron, which is the same metal that he was trapped in when he was released from Takron Galtos in Legion of Superheroes Baxter Run 18. I think it is, the Crisis issue, when we talked about that issue. And Tellus came up upon this black block of Intertron, and he was like, oh no, I don't know what's in there, but I got to free it, and I'm going to regret this. And this sense of Validus just striking fear, even if it's unknown, into people, I love. And they keep that in this issue, which I also love. It's just like the Sentinels in the X-Men. They should always be feared. So we had that, right? Okay, so I took that. And then we go to the Great Darkness Saga, the last chapter, as you mentioned. I also wanted to read one more little quote that Darkseid said. Before he talks about the curse, he says, "You have won, children of the light. The darkness is fading, even as we watch. But remember, the darkness cannot surrender. It is always with you, always on the fringe of the dawn, and the instant you gaze at it in fear, your time will come." Now, that has been referenced before in that scene in issue 24 of the Baxter run between Shadowlass and Mon-El, where she says, what was that Darkness said? That we always have a little bit of darkness, Darkseid's, that we always have darkness in us. And she's like, come to me, my love, I'll keep you safe. Like, that was great. Like, it's like this, just casual references back to Darkseid, which is kind of awesome, But what it had me thinking of is the second quote that you said from Darkseid. And that which is purest of you shall be the first to go. Now, I didn't read the Great Darkness Saga as it was coming out. You did, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The first hint of all of this that I read was Legion Annual number 3. So I read the outcome of the curse and Darkseid stealing the second baby, the second twin, and turning him into Validus. And then I think I read... then I started reading the Baxter run. This issue I've had in my collection for a long time. I am not certain I've ever read it before. But somewhere along the way, I read the Great Darkness Saga. I really need to find out when I read the Great Darkness Saga. I read them in the issues. I picked them up as back issues. That whole thing about that which is purest of you shall be the first to go. You said it was a who. And I think I would have always said it was a who as well. Because I read the Validus reveal, right? I read it before I even understood that it was a bit of retroactive continuity. But I wonder, had I read the Great Darkness Saga first, because he says that which is purest of you, I sort of went, okay, maybe it's more of an abstract thing, right? And even though in the annual 3, in the curse, Darkseid even says, and thus my curse is fulfilled. Like, I love that this annual reprints those. Well, no, doesn't reprint, recreates those pages, right? Which is great. Like, totally recreates the page, the epilogue from annual number 3, so that you don't have to go back. They're setting it up right from the beginning. I do love that they do that in this issue. The dialogue is completely the same, but the artwork is different, okay? And he even says, thus is my curse fulfilled. But then I started to think, especially because how this story played out and the way Darkseid, for lack of a better phrase, just kind of gave in. Maybe there was more to the curse. Maybe there could have been more to the curse, you know? Mm-hmm. I almost feel like the curse fulfilled was that moment where Lightning Lad was just about ready to kill Validus and thus would have killed his own son, right? Mm-hmm. And there is that which is purest of you shall be the first to go. That they don't kill. Like the whole conceit that they are above that. Like, I sort of went backwards and then went, oh, see, maybe yes, it is the child, but maybe it was something deeper. Maybe it could have been something deeper. Now, did it really? I think Levitz kind of hinted, but I don't think he went as deep as I'm going with it.
Yeah.
But I thought that could have been a really interesting twist on the curse, because most people, I think, would have said, as I did, as you did, as most readers, especially once you read Annual 3, you think of it as a who. But maybe it could have been more abstract than that. Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. What do you think of that?
I think that's a great interpretation of this. And given that, you know, it's the whole light versus darkness thing, we have the title, Child of Darkness, Child of Light. And then we get, you know, Lightning Lad, you know, in what you just described, you know, being the embodiment of that concept, that abstract thought that you were describing. You know, I mean, it's there. It's there on the page. It's just, and this is my biggest complaint about this, is that Levitz is just kind of brushing up against these ideas, but not really engaging them, I guess. I mean, I think it would have been a lot. The story would have resonated with, for me a little better had that connection been a little more explicit, perhaps. But then I'd probably be complaining about how, you know, Levitz is spoon feeding us this stuff. But you know, I feel like he's spoon feeding us a little bit already in the way that he's constructing this story. I mean, and this is one of the things I mentioned before. The thing that I glommed onto is that, you know, he starts off the story with, and I think every chapter in here, call it a fairy tale, right? And so he's I think he's trying to elevate this story, this tale, to be something more than just a day or a day or two in the life of these Legionnaires involving Darkseid, right? And trying to prop up Validus as that fearful creature that you described earlier,
like a boogeyman.
Yeah. Except I don't see it. It's not shown to me. It's just that Validus is this angry, mental lightning bolt throwing menace. But is he? I mean, that one of the things I wanted to do, like you, was to go back and look at his appearances to see how Validus has been portrayed since he first debuted, and to see if it was, is he at any point was he portrayed as something other, like, you know, capital O other, that fearful creature under the bed type thing that I think Paul is going for in his you know, call it a fairy tale construction. Unfortunately, I did not. I ran out of time and did not have a chance to do that, to see. I suspect, however, that is not the case. And so, even within the confines of this story, I'm not buying that Validus is this boogeyman that Paul is trying to make him. I don't know if that's fair or not, but
No, I think that makes sense. I mean, when you go back to the first appearance of Validus, he is talking. He does have dialogue, which is kind of crazy. And I think it goes back to that notion of, I almost thought we were getting the origin of Validus. Like, I feel like it would have been really cool to see unseen chapters in Validus's life, away from the Fatal Five.
Yes. Oh my God.
So that you really see that Darkseid, this curse and throwing him back in time, and then he becomes one of the major villains of the Legion of Superheroes to battle his own parents. And here are all these other things that look, he's already killed Invisible Kid, right? Is it really that terrible that if we see these other unseen chapters where maybe he's killed other people? I mean, I think that's where the curse, to me, feels like it still plays out. That even though the baby Validus turns back into the baby, he still killed people. I know the baby's not responsible. You're not gonna off a baby, right? Like I get that, or put a baby in prison, but this notion of what else has he done as Validus could torment his parents and the Legionnaires for a long time. And that's heavy. I think that's maybe heavy and too dark, right? Like, I think, how do you do that in a book like this? I don't think you can.
That's true.
And to your point about like the fairy tale thing, there's dialogue in this where Magnetic Kid is like, oh, I didn't even think Darkseid was real, or whatever he says. That's certainly the way Darkseid is played out in the 30th century, as kind of like just a myth. I think wasn't there a supervillain in one of the issues we read where they were even like, I don't even believe the whole Darkseid thing even happened. It might have even been during the it was during the Legion War, the Villains War, because old Veer was like, his little disciple, and somebody was like, this kid's crazy. There's no Darkseid.
Oh yeah, whatever. That's right. Yeah.
So, so there is that element, at least in terms where the Legion are involved, where Darkseid is the boogeyman. Like, he really is the boogeyman. So, yeah, I think there was a little bit of a missed opportunity. I love the notion that, and this has been said before, but Invisible Kid calls Validus, the French word for infant, or the French word for child, and in a way, maybe Darkseid's right. Maybe he did take the purest of them, because now this little baby has history. It doesn't wipe away that Invisible Kid is dead just because this baby is. So all of those pieces, like you say, are there, and as a reader, we can pull it from that story. But kind of like the Mordru thing, it's almost like he's like, all right, I'm done telling Validus stories. I'm done telling Darkseid curse stories. I want to go on to new things. Here's how I'm going to wrap up. Like it or don't like it. So, it was sort of unfortunate, but
yeah,
there it is.
Well, and so you mentioned Invisible Kid, and so that was one of the things that I thought of as well, is that is sort of a missed opportunity here, given that Validus killed the original Invisible Kid. Maybe that scene with Validus tearing into the Legion headquarters and pulling out, a doll-like Timberwolf. Had that been Invisible Kid, that would have given the moment a little more weight. But maybe that would be too obvious.
Yeah. And Invisible Kid 2 already has history with Darkseid, right? Well, I love that he...
Yes, that and that's what I was thinking. It was, given that connection, that to me that would have played a little bit better in my mind.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, so going back to what Darkseid said and relating it to Invisible Kid, that which is purest of you shall be the first to go. Now, I don't think Invisible Kid was the first to die, But what if he was the purist and he was the first to go via Validus, and then thus the curse fulfilled? Just I don't know. I'm reaching now.
Oh, that's interesting though. I do like that. And if you want to get really metatextual, I mean, what is invisibility but just, pure nothing, right? Like the purest of you is an invisible, you can see right through you. That's kind of weird. That's kind of cool.
I like that.
Yeah. See? Yeah, it's all very interesting. Now, the other thing that I took, just to go back to that whole Great Darkness saga, those quotes, it is always with you, always on the fringe of the dawn, and the instant you gaze at it in fear, your time will come. And I thought, okay, that's the difference between Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl in those 2 pages, 2 or 3 pages. Oh no, it's the 2 pages. Page 36 and 37. Yay, page numbers. Where she realizes who it is. She finally has figured it out. Whether she has figured it out or Darkseid has allowed her to figure it out. Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry. Again, something that should have been more clear. Why the obfuscation here? Obfuscation? Why the? Again, a missed opportunity.
He's Darkseid. What does he say to Ovir? He says, "The game of the gods," right? Like you'll never understand.
That is such lazy writing to me.
When I got to that, what did I write in my notes when I got to that part where Ovir is throwing a tantrum and he's like, "What? Why did you let her know?" And all of this and he says, "The game of the gods." I said, "Yep." I said, "Sometimes it's really just the simplest answer, isn't it?"
Well, and if you want to extract this into a metafictional or metacritical, I don't know what's the right term here, realm, Paul is the god of this
right.
world.
Yep, right. It's like Bugs Bunny and Wile E. Coyote, or with the pencil and the. So my point about those 2 pages between Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl, which is so interesting because we just got the Legionnaires 3 miniseries that kind of also touched on a lot of this stuff with Lightning Lad. Like, clearly Lightning Lad is responding out of rage and you could say fear.
Oh,
right?
Oh yeah. Oh, a parent seeing their child maybe going to die. Oh yeah, there's fear.
Right. So there it is, right? He's gazing into that darkness, and the instant you gaze at it in fear, your time will come. Mm-hmm. But then on the flip of that, Saturn Girl's like, no, wait. First of all, you can't. That's our child. So she doesn't. It's not a pleading. She's not pleading right away. She says, "Look, I know what you did. You had no right to do this. We'll find you wherever you're hiding, make you change Validus back to normal. You're going to give me back my son, Darkseid." So at first, she's saying it's almost like she's saying one of these days we're gonna get you, right? But then by the end, she says, "Please,"
on her knees,
right? But what's interesting is it feels like it's not coming from fear, right? She even says it later, right? Like where she says, "I'm never going to give in to that darkness," because she's confronting him. She's not trying to end a life. She's trying to say, "Look, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. And no matter what it takes, I will come after you." That's not the reaction Darkseid expected. He expected what Lightning Lad was going to do, right? So I feel like, because and then when you turn the page, and I love these images of the shadows of Darkseid. Like you don't really see him. It actually is pretty great on Kurt Swan's part.
Yeah.
If it was his decision.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that if you didn't bring it up. That sequence is one of my favorites in this whole annual.
Yeah, and even the way he's talking off panel to Ovir. Again, we're not seeing him; we're just hearing him or seeing a shadow, seeing the darkness. Right, that's the darkness personified. Mm-hmm. And then he says, "All right." His laughter fills the air with a chill from afar. The darkness of his touch striking the lives that he has twisted. One jest has failed, yet another may serve. And then he says, let the child live, or the narration says, let the child live. If the mother is wise enough to acknowledge the power of the darkness, a power she has denied all her life, let them live, knowing their lives are but a gift of the darkness, which has parted for a time, but which waits for us all. So right there, he's saying she has acknowledged almost respectfully the darkness, not out of fear, but out of whatever emotion that she talks about later. And it's almost like again, like you said, she confronted him the first time, but maybe there was a little bit of that Saturn girl legionnaire haughtiness, right? Like, you feel it, you're losing, we're going to defeat you. This one is different, right? It's like, okay, you might do what you set out to do, but we will come for you and we will get our son back, So, to your point, is it as in-depth as we're making it out to be? Not exactly, but I think it's the closest the story came to what I wanted in those last few pages than in some of the earlier stuff.
Yeah. In fact, some of the stuff that is talked about on those pages, some of the stuff you just read, we get just a few pages later. Really, because when Saturn Girl goes to, I think it's that shrine on Rimmore, right? I'm not entirely sure where this is exactly.
That's how I took it. Yeah.
Yeah. And basically she spells out exactly what we were just told. So again, in the construction of the story, this would have been a much better way to convey those things than through some caption boxes there. But they needed to show something, I guess. But,
well, and to your point, he's trying to write a fairy tale, right? Or he's trying to write. So I guess the narrative sort of makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. It's just I don't know. Like I said, the construction of this is just kind of all over the place and not as successful as I would hope. But having said that, the material, the ideas presented here, like you were describing, I mean, that's really good stuff. We got these two, in part, we got these two parents, not exactly flip sides, but they're definitely coming at the situation differently, and they are playing a part in this fairy tale. Like you said, Darkseid expected the reaction that Lightning Lad is giving, and fulfilling the curse in that way, maybe killing his son. Very, very Shakespearean. Now that I'm thinking about it, right? But then we get the other side in Saturn Girl. To me, well, let me back up. As a parent, I could totally see both of these how this is played out between both sets. As a father, if I see my child being threatened, I'm gonna beat somebody up. I know, maybe will I be able to kill that person? I don't know. It depends on the situation, but I can totally understand the desire to kill someone who threatens my child. And then at the same time, I would totally see myself pleading for the safe return of my child as well. So I could see that I mean, that's very true to me. The how both Garth and Imra address this situation. So that was probably the first time in this story where I was like, ooh, there's something really, really interesting and meaty and emotional here in this. Whereas before it was just, like I said, just kind of, plotting along with the story.
I wrote about those last pages. I said, wow, look at that introspection. Look at that dialogue. If only it was the whole way through. Like, there's so much in those bookends.
Yeah.
I also like when he says, what does he say? Page 41. It has always been the children.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, whether they're children of light, children of darkness, whether they are the sons or the Legion of Superheroes or Validus, it always comes back to the children, which, is a thing for Darkseid. Like, I know the prophecy, right? Like the prophecy of Kirby's New Gods is that Orion is destined to battle Darkseid, if not kill him, right? And there's a lot of father-son stuff here, obviously, between Lightning Lad and Validus, and Darkseid creating a villain out of the son to strike at the father, etc., etc. You know, like you can take it in so many different ways, and you could even take it all the way to the story that you referenced later, The Quiet Darkness, which is all about that whole thing, you know? So, yeah, the last pages, I almost wonder, had those bookends not been there, if I would have been a little bit easier on the issue.
By comparison.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah. Let me throw something at you, since you are, again, you're someone who read these in kind of like a chronological order, more than I did, from the Great Darkness and so forth. What do you think your reaction would have been had you read the Great Darkness saga, read the curse, read the dialogue about the curse, and then read that annual number 3, where Darkseid, quote-unquote, fulfills his curse? However, what if you didn't know what he did? What if this story was the first time we found out that Validus was the baby, and not... What if we didn't have that what if we didn't have that knowledge?
Mm-hmm.
Would the story... Do you think the story would have been better or had more impact?
Oh, definitely more impact. I don't know that the story would be better just based on that, but it's certainly, yeah, the reveal, if we'd gotten it here instead of in that previous annual, would have definitely made more of an impact on me. It would have been a wow moment, as opposed to this is how they explain that ending to the previous annual.
Right, yeah, because, it's almost built like a mystery, right? Like, Olvir is taking Validus through these different places, and then he takes him to Metropolis, and Validus just attacks this random apartment that we don't know. The Legionnaires don't know at first. Oh, this crib falls out. And then suddenly Ultra Boy's like, oh, that's the crib we gave to Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl. And, and then he goes to Validus then goes to the Legion headquarters. He takes out the Lightning Lad and Saturn Girl symbols, and then he shows up on Wyneth. And it's like, oh, had we not known, I really wonder if, even with the way the story was executed, like, the clues are kind of there and they're obvious, it might have been more fun,
mm-hmm.
And especially those longtime Legion readers who maybe, if this was a theory among them way before Levitz ever touched on it, they might have been like, oh my god, oh look, they're doing it and then she says, he's our child, and they would have been like, oh my god, yay.
Yeah.
I feel like this story really would have been way different. So on one hand, knowing ahead of time, getting that retroactive thing that Levitz and company did was really cool and interesting, but did it blow the reveal here, or did it blow the ending here? I don't know.
I think so. I had that in my notes too, the clues that we're getting in this issue, and it's like, yeah, okay, but the clues are more for the characters in the story, and they're definitely not for us if you've read that previous annual. It's just like, oh, we're just getting more confirmation that this is the character that it turns out to be.
Well, and maybe there were some readers that didn't read.
Well, yeah, sure.
Wait, it's in the first bookend now.
Yeah.
He says, yeah. I guess what you don't know is that he stole Saturn Girl's baby, right?
Yeah, if you were only reading this annual, yeah.
Well, no, he says your mother, your father, even your twin. I mean, I guess you could surmise, or maybe that was Levitz going, all right, I'm going to do this for readers who don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you could maybe still go, wonder who he's talking about, I don't know. Whatever. Anyway. So some larger points that I thought we pulled out of the story.
Let me ask you a question, since I think we're about talked out on this issue. There was something I found on Comic Book DB in the Wayback Machine. So I looked up this annual on that archived page, and there is a note. So they have a synopsis too, which was much shorter than mine. But in that synopsis, I found something very curious. And I don't know who wrote this, or if was this from the solicitation back in the day, or what? But it said, quote, Validus seeks out Saturn Girl and Lightning Lad, hoping to get them to destroy him.
Weird.
What do you think of that?
I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
Because the blurb on the inside cover says, Child of Darkness, Child of Light. Paul Levitz, Kurt Swan tell us what happens when Validus confronts his parents. Will Darkseid win after all? There was the dialogue. Let me see. I pulled out one thing about Validus that I liked. That speaks to, Olvir. Okay, so on 17, Olvir says, is it not a wonder how he makes his way? He's talking about Validus. How his every step is guided by a wisdom he does not have. Does his mind hear echoes of another world leading him on, or has the master given him a gift beyond even my understanding? Almost to the point where it's like, he feels like he is looking for something, right? And I guess it's on page 5. They call Validus the Lost One. Where's it at here? He walks across the planet Rimbor. Why must it hurt so to think when he knows his mind has power? Why can no one hear his tortured cries when his voice is so loud? And on the previous page, page 4, the Dark Child, the Lost One. I sort of thought, and then again, when Darkseid changed him, it's probably clear that he did not age him. He just changed him.
Mm-hmm.
So you send him back to 1967, he's a baby. That's why Invisible Kid calls him a baby, an infant, a child. He throws tantrums like a baby. So how many years has it been since Validus' first appearance and this story? I don't know. Sliding scale, maybe 10, maybe 8. Okay, so now, or however old Graham is, I don't know. Well, no, that doesn't make sense. But my point being, okay, I could sort of see that maybe Validus is looking for his parents, but to end him or to end his torture. Maybe that's a better way to say it than to end him. So,
and
yeah, that's an interesting. I don't know why they would think that deep.
Yeah, and why now? Why is Validus even engaging at this point? And I'm, I guess the obvious answer is that Darkseid's pushing him, or the story demands it. But yeah, it's just lots of things that just sort of add up.
Or I guess you could say that Validus finally caught up to his birth.
Mm. Oh, now we're getting into the timey-wimey stuff.
Yeah, because he sent him back, but in current Legion time, when they had the baby, I think Validus was on Takran Galtos. He was imprisoned.
Mm-hmm.
So he couldn't have gone after, and that's why, remember, and then when we talked about issue 18, Validus gets sent away, and there's a voice that says, "Come, Validus," right? And I was like, oh, it's the Anti-Monitor, but it's also Darkseid, and like, okay, so now, yeah, he maybe Darkseid was just like, I'm gonna wait. I'll wait. He's let them free him, and then it'll be really on their end. Tellus had to free him, so it's like, oh, not only is he responsible for all this, but you just released him, and that's why he's gonna go after your parents. I don't know. You know, you could sort of make it that. I guess you could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, such an interesting character. I do like Validus a lot, and I like the whole curse thing, you know. And I feel like as disjointed as it can be, and I know we do get yet another payoff, you know, like you said, in a story decades in, or not decades, years in the Legion's future. I think there, you know, we'll probably come back to this, you know, at some point. I did like, and I'm sure you read it, in the letter column in issue 33, in the one letter about this annual that apparently we found, that's the only one they printed, Paul Levitt says, I guess he's basically talking about answering the question of, you know, with Legion Annual number 2, it seems that you are continuing to remold the Legion and make your definitive mark upon them. So far, you've freed yourself of the constraints of the infamous Adult Legion story. You've created a new Fatal Five, reformed Mordru, and now Validus. I still doubt that darkness would show such mercy, but I suppose it's not for us mortals to question the games of the gods. There you go again. This is James Rickliff. And then Paul Levitz responds, these days we're attributing all of our remolding to sheer endurance. After 10 years' passage since we began our first stint as the Legion's regular writer, and over 100 issues, there's a certain tendency to have touched on enough of the different aspects of the Legion to have remolded them. As for Darkseid's mercy, only the future will reveal the price of his mercy. Sort of saying, look, there's only so much we can cover in 100 issues, and at some point we got to do something different, or I'm gonna be lazy, or I'm gonna get bored as a writer, right? And I feel like Levitz is saying, I have to put an end to some of these stories because I need to move on to new things. And if you write 100 issues of the Legion, guess what? They're going to fight the Fatal Five at least once. And they're going to fight Mordru at least once. And I'm tired of them fighting the same characters. You know? I don't know. I don't know if that's what he's saying, but I sort of got that notion. And I think he's right, too. Like, the writer's like, hey, you finally are... I'm like, well, I mean, Levitz has been on this book for a long time.
Yeah.
I think it is clearly... This Baxter run, is his run. I mean, he is not riffing on he's not in anybody's shadow in this entire Baxter run. And I'd argue even in the regular run before it.
Oh, yeah.
He was not in anybody's shadow. So, and if anything, he's starting to, I know there's a couple times that we read certain stories where it's like, oh, look, Paul Levitz is recalling Paul Levitz, some of his first stories, which is kind of cool. So,
well, so it's interesting you brought up that quote from Paul about Darkseid's mercy. Only the future will reveal the price of his mercy, right? And so couple that with the final text of this annual after Santa Girl speeches at him, and he laughs at her on that final page, or he laughs, to close the book on, he starts laughing, he ends laughing. That's fine. But it says, the caption box is simply the beginning. And which frustrated the crap out of me, Peter. It's like, we have this wrap up of this 4-year-long story idea, and then we get just it's the beginning, and then I read that reaction or that response in the letter column as only the future will reveal the price of his mercy. Well, so here's I don't know if we could technically call it a subplot because it actually hasn't appeared in the issue, but Paul the writer is saying, hey, there's more to this. And so do we get it? Are we going to get more of this, and how is it, what's going to happen? And with me, or in my mind, that whole idea of you brought this up earlier about how little Validus, I think he gets a different name down the road, but the twin returned, him being a child and yet having this history as the creature Validus, and the relationship between Validus and the Legion, and him now being the son of two of the founders of the Legion. How does, I doubt we're going to even get into all that, but man, in my mind, that makes a really interesting, potential interesting interplay between these characters, these teammates.
Is it any wonder why people write fan fiction? Because it's like we're digging into this book from 30 years ago or whatever it is, 30 plus years ago, and we're like, oh, we could do this. Oh, we could do this. But we already know the answers to a lot of the questions, and it's always like, this is why people write fan fiction, right? Like, yeah. I want to read a story where Saturn Girl is visiting the headquarters and with little baby Validus, and Computo is showing them the way, and then down the hall is Duo Damsel and Invisible Kid number 2, and they're both looking at both of those, Computo and little Validus, and going, what the F?
God.
Why are these people, they're clearly going to give the side eye to little baby. I would.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be like, perfect. I'm sorry, who is that? Which is, and again, not only does the Darkseid thing play out in the 5 years later run, but so does the Validus thing a little bit, right? If you remember, I don't want to say, but maybe I'll say, I'll quickly say it off air, and then I'll delete this.
Oh, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, there, I told Eric, but listeners, you don't get to hear. You have to read it. See, and that's why, again, I think that's why we did this Baxter run, because there are some story points that later writers do pull from this run, which is great. So somebody's doing the legwork.
Yeah.
I only have just a few quick notes of other things. Do you want to I don't know if you have anything like that.
I just have a couple too.
Do you have anything for pages 1 through 4?
Really just the art. These bookends by Giffen and the inkers. I love the way that Giffen plays with black.
Yeah.
On the page, and not even just with Darkseid, just his other work, and we've talked. I'm sure we've talked about this in some other issues as well. I'm probably even the Laurel Kent annual. There's a lot of that in there going on there. So yeah, I really love that.
I liked Olvir's transformation throughout this issue, kind of almost transforming into rock or like the facade of Darkseid. I thought that was kind of fun and creepy.
Yeah. I mean, that to me, it was very clearly he is becoming the image of his master, and the way it's depicted, because they have this Darkseid shrine, and there's the light coming through Darkseid's eyes, and is this? I mean, this has to be Darkseid's doing, right? It can't just be this thing that maybe Olvir created. It's got to be Darkseid, and so he steps into the light, and this invulnerable Daxamite is transformed. So I just thought that was a really cool thing.
Yeah, what's going on Rimbor that they got that there? Jeez.
Yes, yeah. I had the same thought, and it was like, well, are we going to come back to this? This is a potential. We're doing the fan fiction thing, or I'm doing the fan fiction thing again. But is Rimbor going to be some sort of base for this new Darkseid cult thing? I don't know.
Which would have been cool. That would have been cool if that was a subplot. And, Darkseid is this great mystery, yet he totally terraformed a planet, and billions of people went to fight him. Clearly people know that he exists, yet he's still only, it's like Voldemort, right? He's only talked about in hushed tones. So,
Well, and it could have kicked off a great Ultra Boy centric story.
True.
Since we're just talking about Olvir real quick, this is one of the things I wanted to bring up. Going back to that issue 294, I noticed in that. So this, I think maybe that's the first appearance of Olvir, but it was definitely around this time. But anyway, Chameleon Boy, who's also in prison at this time, and Olvir is trying to kill him. Cam is able, though, to throw Olvir into Validus's cell. And so I'm thinking, wait, did Paul plan this pairing that early, or is this just one, he just happened to, Validus is the only creature that could contain a child Daxamite superpowered character for that plot point and then move on. And then, was he even thinking about this when he brought them together here in this annual?
There's been way too many of those coincidences to keep calling them coincidences. Yeah. And then, there's the callback on page 9. We sort of touched on it. Invisible Kid touching his hair because the white streak was given to him because he was scared of Darkseid, which I think is brilliant. I like the fact that Block and Invisible Kid are actually in the damn story because they barely do anything in this Baxter run. So it's nice to see them.
On page 12, this is one of the things about the construction of the story, not the actual narrative itself, but it made me think, because this is the page where Wildfire is going up against Olvir, and we get this kind of, again, it's more of a Silver Agey thing where you get the character explaining what's going on instead of us being shown what's going on, and I wondered if did Paul give Kurt Swan an outline, more of the Marvel style, and then Paul had to go back in and fill in, the gaps, so to speak, in the narrative, because, like I said, Wildfire has to explain to us as it's happening what's going on to him, and so yeah, it's just and then we also get, there's a lot of. And I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, but there's a lot of weirdly angled panels throughout the Kurt Swan section, and it's they're constructed that way because it shows us what we need to see in that panel. But it struck me as kind of odd in the way that we get those kind of even on page 14 we get, it's a 5-panel page with what's that shape? Not a diamond, but
yeah, I would have said diamond, diamond-esque.
Yeah, a parallelogram. I don't know, but anyway, the point is that there's a lot of this construction throughout like I said, the Kurt Swan stuff. So it's interesting. I'm not quite sure what the point is, other than to fill the panels with the art that he wants to use. I don't know. It's an oddly constructed comic book, I guess is my point.
I mean, it's interesting to see Kurt Swan. Like, his anatomy is still good.
Mm-hmm.
Like sometimes artists, when they get older, their anatomy starts to go. Like, I love George Perez, but some of his artwork now, and of course a lot of it has to do with his eyesight and things like that, but, some of the anatomy just feels a little off. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, there's still some good stuff. Now, for me, it's really the perspective stuff that bothers me the most, because I love, like I talked about it before, the headquarters, like they actually acknowledge that it's not quite the way I think it should have been, but that the front part of the headquarters can take off, right? Like it can fly. Now, when you look at the schematics, you sort of get the notion that only the top of the front part is the ship. But this one, they're kind of like... But what's so weird about it is that the front cylinder part is separate from the arms, which doesn't feel right at all. And when you look at other drawings of the headquarters and that original Giffen drawing, like those extensions are clearly part or connected too. It's not like they're two different pieces. So I don't know. There's a lot wrong with the headquarters here, which, Kurt Swan is like, all right, it just looks like a big block. Whatever. I'm just going to 2 arms and a midsection. That's enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
I had a thought about when we get to Wyneth and Val just shows up, and then Saturn Girl's like, all right, let me let the people give him a suggestion to run. They lead a simple life, so it's good that they can be controlled. And Wyneth is a what do they call it here? An agrarian planet. Is Lightning Lad a farm boy?
Sure seems that way. Or at least he would have been. I don't know.
I mean, I don't know how deep they're going into this whole agricultural thing. Like, I know there's a lot of farms, and they work on them, and they're always nude, or at least later on they are. Like, it made me wonder, is that why he's such a, is he like the Sam Guthrie of the Legion of Superheroes? Is he a farm boy? So, not a big notion. I just, it's just something that spoke to me a little bit that I didn't think about with his character before.
Well, and since we're on this section, that splash page introducing part 3 where we're on Wyneth, I loved it. That's we're kind of poo-pooing some of what Kurt Swan's doing here, but this is beautiful. Talk about perspective. Going back all the way to those what looks like a glacier in the background. I think really well done. And the the colors are beautiful in this, giving us this alien landscape, and I really dug that page.
Yeah, I think overall, it's not that I'm disappointed that Kurt Swan drew the book. There's just some inconsistencies. I think it's fine. I mean, it's Kurt Swan. I like Kurt Swan. I know maybe you're not as strong a fan as I am. But I appreciate that even in his older age that he was that he can whip out a book like this. That's pretty cool. A lot of characters, a lot of costumes he's got.
Oh yeah,
that he's gotten right.
Yeah. He's definitely got some very distinct strengths that you can see on the page here.
Maybe it's just the match of artist and story. That under a different artist, obviously, it would have been a different story, probably, or differently told, I should say. Yeah, so interesting for really interesting analysis, and I like the stuff we were able to pull from it, and as most of these issues go, now it's like, okay, what happens next?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be small, subtle things probably, and then we'll go, oh, there it is, that one little bit of dialogue. And maybe that's all we get, because Paul Levitz is like, all right, I'm done with Censor Girl. I'm done with Darkseid. Let's go. Something else. Let's talk about our next episode, which will also be a Tales episode. We talked about it in episode 27 of the Legion Project that we're going to do 2 back-to-back Tales episodes to kind of give us a break away from the main story. Obviously, we had to cover the annual, but for next episode, you want to run with what we're doing?
Yes. So this is what we were hinting at the beginning of the episode. So we thought it would be fun to leave it up to you, the listeners, what we talk about next in the next Tales of the Legion Project. And so we have some choices for you. And what I'm going to do is put a poll out on Twitter. So as you're listening to this, that poll should be out on my Twitter feed. And so we have 3 options for you to vote on. And so whatever the majority chooses, Peter and I will talk about that particular set of issues in the next episode. And so the choices are the current Legion book, issues 1 through 6. So we've already talked about issue 1 in a previous Tales episode, but we thought we could go back to talk about that first kind of collected trade set of issues. So that's the first one. The second one is a Legion related, Legion inspired series called Quantum Age. This was a series put out by Dark Horse Comics from the world of Black Hammer by Jeff Lemire and Wilfredo Torres. And so this very heavily borrows from Legion mythos and Legion concepts. So that's one possibility. And then finally, something, I don't know if I should weight it this way, Peter, but something near and dear to our hearts, Peter and my hearts, a Star Trek Legion crossover. Which was a miniseries put out by IDW, I think. Mm-hmm. I don't have it in front of me. So, but this takes our beloved Star Trek characters, Captain Kirk and company, and then pairs them up with a Legion of Superheroes. So we get one of those great crossover possibilities. So those are our 3 options. Your 3 options, dear listeners, that you can vote on. And then, like I said, whoever it ends up being, we will talk about those in the next episode. Did I miss anything, Peter?
No, I think that's right. And they're all 6 issues, right? 1 through 6 of the current run. I believe Quantum Age is also 1 through 6. Mm-hmm. And the Star Trek Legion of Superheroes from 2011 is also 6 issues as well. So, pick one of those 3 in the poll. What do you want us to talk about? The good thing about the Tales is we don't have to stay within the 1980s, and we don't have to stay within DC. We can try to branch out.
Yeah.
As you mentioned with the Quantum Age, to things that were either inspired by the Legion or obviously we've already covered an animated movie, so the the idea is that we can go anywhere. So here's like a really good example of what we can do with the Tales, especially since we're taking a little break here with this next chapter of the Tales. So please vote, and I'm excited to see what they choose.
Me too. I have been, ever since we talked about this, I think I mentioned this earlier, I have been so excited to announce this and especially to see what the results are. What will the listeners choose? I cannot wait.
Are you going to vote? I'm going to vote.
I don't think I get to vote if I do the poll.
Why not? No?
It won't allow me to. Oh wait, I could use my other Twitter account to vote.
Oh, there you go.
My secret Twitter account.
There you go. Yeah, I'm going to vote.
Why not? It's our show.
Be 2 votes. Me and you.
Well,
what happens if there's a tie? We should.
You're right. You're right.
We'll put it in a hat or something like that.
Yeah. I was gonna say, it's our show. We could just make the choice. But yeah, the hat thing is good.
Eeny meeny.
I won't say, but I think I know what you and I will vote for. So I don't want to tip the scales in one way or the other. Even though that's what we're doing.
No, it'll be a surprise. I think all 3 choices are great.
Oh my God, yeah.
Well, plenty to talk about.
The nice thing is that we could always go back to those other 2 that don't make the first cut.
Exactly.
At some point. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And don't forget about Eric's contest. He wants to give you his Tales reprint issues. So please send us an email. All you have to do is say, just say, hey, I want to be entered in the contest for the Tales books or something like that.
Yeah. So, you can even say, give me your comics.
And you can do that at peter@thedailyrios.com or
longboxreview@gmail.com.
All right. This has been the 6th Tales of the Legion Project podcast. Thanks for listening and playing along with us. Any last words, Eric?
Long live the Legion. Oh wait, did we do that here?
No, we don't, but that's okay. Long live the Legion Project.
Long live the Legion. Yeah, there we go. Long live the Tales of the Project.
Oh, see, it's too many
One
words.
of the, yeah, it is. Way too many. Nope. Bye, everybody.
See ya. Bye.
Bye, Peter.